Today I'm with another special guest. We've actually had him on fairly recently, but there was such a plethora of topics that we wanted to talk about. We actually ended up talking about what we weren't necessarily planning to talk about in the first place. That was Hyvä, but it was an absolute dynamite conversation, so it was really awesome. We're going to be diving into another topic that this person is very familiar with. Just so I don't hold you in suspense for too long, this person is Willem Wigman from the Netherlands. And we're going to be talking about MOSCA, Mage-OS, the open source task force, all this stuff that's kind of pulled together under one umbrella called the future of Magento. And Willem is very passionate about Magento. He's invested heavily in it through the Hyvä theme and been very influential in the community as far as what is happening, what are the next steps with Magento. And so it's a tremendous honor to have him on this show once again. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the Swift Otter Inc. YouTube channel or on whatever your favorite podcast syndication platform is, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. We're there under the Smash the Bug title. So without further ado, let's welcome Willem into this conversation. Welcome, Willem. It's great to have you here. It's great to be here. Thank you. Well, so you are very influential, I would say, as far as the direction of the Magento community. Probably most people know you, or at least a significant number of those in the Magento community know you. And I hope to increase that number here with these conversations. What do you say? Let's just start out from the biggest overview question. What do you see as the future of Magento? What is it going to look like in 3 years?
In 3 years? I don't know if much changes in the next 3 years. Okay. I think most changes will be a bit further away than that. I think we'll start to see biggest changes after the next 3 years. Okay. That's a timeline that is too short for me to plan my whole future with Magento with. And there were quite some uncertainties about the future of Magento. We could guess that we would have a certain future for Magento for the upcoming years because there's just too much that depends on Magento currently for Adobe to be able to really switch directions there. So I wasn't too concerned with the short-term changes, but still, I've had concerns about not having a public roadmap for Magento, for example, and not really seeing what direction Magento Open Source was going to go. So that's one of the reasons why I felt it was necessary to get a response from Adobe there, to light a fire in the community, to kind of demand to hear something about the future of Magento, because as most listeners will be aware, Magento is moving towards a distributed application or distributed platform with more and more SaaS solutions. And we hear things like microservices and headless front end. So Adobe's moving towards this headless well, it's called PWA Studio, but it's hard to say they're moving towards PWA because it's the wrong term. But go listen to the last episode. We'll explain a bit more what the difference between PWA and single page application is. So let's not discuss that again. But so let's call it they're moving to PWA Studio and a more headless architecture, where also other front ends can hook into that headless architecture. And in all that, we see these architectural schemas at Adobe conferences where they show how Adobe Commerce will fit into the rest of their products. So in that landscape of services that they have. And if you search for it, you will find a PHP application there somewhere that is currently Magento as a PHP platform. We call it a Monolith. And the great monolith that is currently the backend and the front end all in one. So that's the old school thing that I personally love to work with and I want to continue working with. But Adobe's moving more and more away from that monolith. And we didn't really know because that has all the hype, and that's the future music, or the ideal landscape that Adobe wants to go to. And that's just very different from what I am working with today and what I want to continue working with. So all the attention goes there. And because of all the hype around it, it seems like that's the only truth. Like that's the only direction you could go if you want to continue working with Magento or Adobe Commerce. And I didn't believe that to be true. I think Magento has a very long future ahead, and there's such a big community, such a big ecosystem that Magento can't go away. There will be too many people that are concerned about what that's going to look like in the future. And they're willing to fight for that future and contribute to it and invest into it, because we're already heavily invested. People like yourself and me, we're in this Magento community for over 10 years. And I'm definitely not ready to give up on the great Monolith. So, on the one hand, that felt uncertain. I had a belief that we as a community care so much that we're willing to make this work and to, for all I care, take over the whole maintainership of Magento Open Source. I truly believe that's something that the community can carry, because we've been building this product for over 10 years together with Magento and eBay and now Adobe. So a lot of knowledge and a lot of power lies in that community to be able to do that. At some point we decided we need more information. Like we need some certainty. So we wrote this open letter where we declared that at least we're going to take a bit of control into our own hands. We called it a Magento fork. So we would clone the Magento repository and start doing some maintainership there ourselves and make some improvements and see if we're able to maintain a fork like that. So that we can improve on some things, like making it more accessible to small, medium businesses, making it easier to contribute, make sure that performance improvements that are currently being built from the community can actually be put into the core. So you've talked to Ivan Ciperni.
Amen.
Go and listen to the previous episode with Ivan. It was also great. He was your guest just recently. Ivan is part of our initiative, and Ivan is a great mind. He has such a great ideas to improve the core performance of Magento, and he's just very restricted currently. Like he's had some tough experiences with contributing very large portions of code to make the core of Magento better or faster, or at least make improvements there. And they either weren't accepted, or they were accepted and then thrown away again, or that whole process is just very, very rough to be in. So we had the idea, so we don't know what Adobe is going to do in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. So let's at least create this backup plan for ourselves, and make sure that we get some experience in how to run a clone of Magento, a fork. So that's nothing really revolutionary. Like we didn't think like we're going to clone it today and tomorrow merchants are going to switch to our fork. That definitely wasn't the intention. But it was more our intention to harvest the energy of the people in the community that feel like they want to contribute, but they can't. So let's get those people into our initiative and give them a place to contribute and work together on making improvements. Let's gather the experience of maintaining a fork like that, running the infrastructure, and see if we can make small adjustments and improvements there. And who knows if Adobe would say in 3 or 5 years we're going to deprecate Magento Open Source, which is a very big question mark and very uncertain. So that is definitely not something I'm saying that's going to happen. But it was just too uncertain to just lay back and wait until something like that would happen. So
Yes.
We announced we were going to get started with that to see if we could find a following and some support, and if we could get started with that, so that over the upcoming, let's say, 2 to 3 years, we build up something there. Like, we build a group of people that are interested in collaborating on this, see if we can make small successes there, if we can manage to make improvements, and create patches, perhaps even create a patch that can be pushed to the core Magento product, so we could contribute there. But with us, you could get your fix merged in quicker, because we're working on a smaller scale. So we caused kind of a uproar, or like we got a fair amount. We got some attention.
You used the word uproar. You used the word kind of. That was kind of nothing. It was one of the biggest deals I've seen in the Magento community, maybe ever. Somewhere along those lines. Yeah, it was a very significant deal. Yeah.
It was perhaps also a bit provocative, because we intended, like, we waited for a couple of months before we actually took action, because we were looking, from my perspective, from Hyvä, I rely on a monolith, so I want this to continue. But I also didn't want to increase the uncertainty about the future of Magento, because that doesn't help anyone. But at some point we felt like, okay, so a lot of things were happening around us, and we saw these key people from the community dropping off and leaving, and other platforms gaining interest, because there's so much uncertainty on the Magento ecosystem. Everyone just felt too demotivated to actually do something, and we felt like that energy was gone, and people got more and more frustrated, and felt like, okay, so now let's make an impact, get the attention from the right people, and get a positive energy that we can make some change. And it caused uproar. It caused positive reactions, negative reactions, but mostly it caused emotions, and those are always good. People are very passionate about Magento, and a lot of people kind of forgot that, and a lot of people felt like they were alone having this passion for Magento, because nothing really happened in the community, and then suddenly everyone became loud again. So that was very good, because a lot of people found each other again, and
yes.
And within no time, some really well-known people from the Magento community from all over the world traveled to Poland to a conference to discuss the future of Magento, which was fantastic. Yes. Like, you can't imagine, like, Talesh coming all the way from Canada, just booking a plane ticket days beforehand, and Karen Baker flying in, just because these people care so much about what happens in this community. Yes. There we got to discuss the future of Magento with the Magento Association, who had this idea that they could play a role in the future of Magento Open Source, which comes all the way back from when Ben Marks was still involved in the beginning of the Magento Association, where he said here and there on podcasts and in discussions, like, he could see the association at some point taking over the maintenance, or like becoming the shepherd of Magento Open Source, and that never became concrete. Like, there was never anything officially communicated about that. So, and I think the association felt a bit purposeless until we published that letter. And I know they've been working on the background on a lot of things. They recently published this document about the 4 pillars of the association, the things that they find important that they're going to work on. Open source is one of those pillars. It's the 4th and last one. So I don't know if that's ordered on priority, but they had this idea that they could play a role in the future of Magento Open Source. Also because they hold a license to use the Magento branding. They have direct contact with Adobe. So they started the open source task force. It might be interesting to talk about that later as well. it sparked something there. It sparked something with Adobe. They took direct contact, or they contacted us directly about our plans and how we see how a fork like that would work. And a lot of people were offended by the term fork. If you go to GitHub, you find thousands and thousands of forks of Magento Open Source. I always joke because you can only contribute to Magento by creating a fork. So
yes, exactly.
There's plenty of people that created a fork of Magento, but this felt more like a lot of people felt like, well, if you're going to state you're going to fork Magento, go your own way, that causes a split in a community. And that's definitely not what we want. Rather than that, what we want is those people that are currently looking to leave the Magento ecosystem, that they find a place where they can stay. And perhaps people find a place within our initiative and Magento under Adobe. And if they contribute or work with Magento, they can, we can all live in harmony and share the same passion and work on the same product.
Sure.
So we kind of toned that down by calling it a distribution now, which also reflects much more what we want to do. And that direction change also came from talking with Adobe directly, talking with our architects and with product managers there. So what it currently looks like, what we're trying to do with MOSCA, is trying to create a distribution of Magento. And that would be based on the core product, Magento Open Source. But if you look at how Composer works, Magento currently is a meta package of a lot of packages from Magento.
That's right.
So a lot of modules. So you have one meta package from Composer, and that just tells you pull in the customer and the checkout and the inventory, pull in all these modules, and that makes Magento Open Source. And if you add extra packages to it, you get Magento Commerce or Adobe Commerce.
That's right. Yeah.
So if we go into the other direction, instead of going up to Commerce, go down and go to the SMB or the Lite or whatever, a smaller package of Magento, which could be simply a Composer package that pulls in some of the existing packages, but also remove some that we don't need. So maybe not by default install multi-inventory, and maybe not even install GraphQL, maybe not install Vertex or any tax modules that only serve the US market. So there's a lot of things you can make optional, and you could slim down that core, and we could add some packages, for example, with performance optimizations from Ivan. And we could slowly try to improve that meta package with alternative packages, and so create a different distribution. We would still base that on top of our fork of Magento, which is basically just in sync with the core product from Adobe. Which just simply means that we still build up the experience of running those automated tests and packaging those modules, because Magento is a mono repo. It's just one big repository with all these modules, and then they somehow package it into Composer packages.
There'll be a lot of code that is involved in that process. Yeah,
so we're reproducing that code that's currently being worked on.
Oh wow, okay.
So we're trying to replicate how that works. And got quite far with that, actually. So we were currently a bit on hold because of the Black Friday, Cyber Monday period. But that work will resume this month and upcoming month. So that's something that we're working on. As soon as we have that stable and running, we'll open that to the public. And also start opening up our we have what's it called? Not Slack, but the other one, Discord. We have a Discord environment where I think beginning next year we'll start to open that up and invite people from the outside, also ask their opinions. Currently, we just try to keep it small because then we can move a bit faster. And we're looking how we can set up a official organization around that to provide funding for the work that will be done there, and set up an official entity and go and give people voting rights and all that stuff.
Very good.
I hope we can somehow collaborate with the association there, and the task force is an interesting thing that happens there. It's not entirely sure yet what the direction of that task force is going to be, although it's become a lot more clear to me in the past meetings that we've had. But yeah, it depends a bit on what the association, what they want to do long term, like what kind of organization they want to become. They have the perfect bylaws and the perfect structure to become an organization like we need from MOSCA, from our perspective. We need some umbrella organization that manages the funds and the legal aspects and all that. And we have many ideas about how that organization should look like, which we also discussed with Adobe and with the task force. So we're really transparent in that, and we'll open that up to the public as well. And yeah, I think beginning next year we can put some more work in that. So yeah, that's all a lot of information.
Yes.
What do you make from it?
It's good, and I have a couple questions that I was writing down that I would like to pick your brain on. And I think it all relates to the future of Magento. And I'm going to try not to get in trouble for asking these questions. But my goal is to get out of the to step outside of the Magento community just for a minute. So I don't know if that's possible, but I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions along those lines, and I'm really curious your thoughts on this. So. So again, this is just a disclaimer. I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for saying this, but I keep hearing of merchants leaving Magento too, and I think there's quite a number of reasons for that. A lot of reasons for this, but do you think that we are in a situation where we have gotten to the tail end of Magento's, or we've hit Magento's half-life is probably the best way to put it. So thus the excitement is no longer around Magento and other platforms like Shopify. I think Shopware is kind of working to get there. It's still maybe a few years out. It's some of these, I guess Shopify probably honestly is the biggest one that has a really excited fan base around it, or really excited community. Do you think that we have kind of entered into this not OS commerce wasn't. Yeah, OS commerce. Like some of these, we know them as old platforms in the past. Do you think the Magento has gotten to that place?
I don't think it's gotten to that place. I definitely think it was heading that place. If we wouldn't have done anything, I don't think Adobe was so much aware of what was happening there. I don't think they necessarily do this on purpose, but the fact that the monolith or the platform is, I've called it a number of times in public, I've called it on life support. I really feel like the monolith currently is being fed water and bread just enough to survive, to stay secure and stable. And don't mistake me for saying they are careless or they don't invest at all, because it costs a lot of money just to run the infrastructure and to still handle all those pull requests and to do the security upgrades and stay PCI compliant. And they provide all of that, and we should all be really thankful for Adobe providing this.
Exactly.
So no bad words there. But they've chosen a direction that's different from where I would like to go with the platform. And I think PHP is going through some exciting innovations. Like PHP 8 is really great. And 7 has been really great. And there are different ecosystems within the Magento ecosystem, like Laravel, that are exciting. Really cool things are happening there. The innovation rate is the highest that you can see that I at least see online. And I think the Magento platform has been stagnant. Like the past 5 years, the PHP platform hasn't seen real innovation. And that used to come for a large part from the community. Adobe was, I don't know if gloating is a too negative word, but they were proudly presenting the one-click checkout the day after Amazon one-click buy patent expired. That was contributed from the community, and
yes.
Adobe presented on stage like this is the true strength of the community behind Magento, and Adobe is so excited about this and wants to leverage this energy. And that was more or less the last thing we saw from that innovation, because then it became harder and harder to contribute and all those processes around it. And now you need to write tests for code that you didn't even write yourself, like you want to contribute something, and then a core test fails because it actually isn't, the test is already failing in core, but because you're touching that bit of code, now you are the one responsible for writing that test.
Yes.
So your fix never gets merged. And in the end, the merchant is not getting that improvement from that PR just because of a technicality. And that's truly one of the things that we're discussing with Adobe right now with the task force, where we have bi-weekly meetings, so every second week, not twice a week. We have these meetings where we talk about how we can improve those things, and they're really listening and trying to actively improve on that. But just the fact that over the last years, no one really stood up and pushed Adobe to listen and really make a change there, because, well, we can see a community is draining there just because no one is leveraging the energy that is actually there. And then, yeah, indeed, a platform like Shopware, they are picking up whatever is being dropped there, and they're picking up the breadcrumbs and happily growing quite rapidly there. And good for them. I mean, they also have a nice platform. They have a really nice head of global growth.
Yes.
But that was one of my frustrations. Like, Hyvä brought a real impulse to the community, and I tried to involve Ben into it, and he was ripped because he was torn in two, because he already made his decision at that point to go to Shopware. It's just before he announced it, and he also felt like this is something really exciting that we needed for this community, and he wanted to jump in on that. But yeah, he already chose to go to Shopware, and I think, well, it's his task to expand the Shopware community globally. I think in order to pass Magento in terms of size and community and just the sheer knowledge around it and the amount of plugins and extensions and SaaS solutions and education platforms and all of that stuff doesn't really exist yet for Shopware internationally. So they have it's a lot harder for them to grow and catch up with Magento than it is for us to put in some fresh energy and give a new impulse to the current platform. Because to be honest, like the week before I started with Hyvä, the day before, I installed Shopware and I looked at it and I was just, I felt like I don't want to learn all this new stuff. Like, I'm so good at Magento. I can do anything. I really mastered Magento. And I want to continue working with this platform. I don't want to learn all that new stuff, and I was just not motivated to get started with that. So then I decided just to have fun with Magento and improve that platform as good as I could. How do we proceed? Do we just continue? You dropped out for a second.
I know, I did. I have my internet router up here, and I saw it started flashing red. I was like, oh, man. Oh, well. Yeah, so I guess I'll just jump in. I have another question here. You mentioned at the beginning that there was no real roadmap for Magento Open Source. After a month or two later, we had the Magento Association Connect meeting. And Eric Irway and some of the other folks there, they basically said, hey, we know that there hasn't been a roadmap, so here's the roadmap. And oh, by the way, Magento is only going to get maintenance fixes now and insecurity fixes. What's your reaction to that? And because from my perspective, I see the logic in this, that like features are going to be added as external modules, so they're not part of the monolith, if you will, anymore. So if you can bolt on a feature if you want, which sounds similar an idea to the MOSCA or the Mage-OS concept. But yeah, so I guess the question is, does this idea, first off, I guess it's a two-part question. Does the roadmap help satisfy the question that you guys were asking? And second, how does it look to you guys, or work for you all, the fact that Magento, the monolith, is not going to get any cool new features now?
Yeah, I think that last thing we already knew, but it just wasn't communicated officially. So I'm mostly satisfied with the amount of things that we got confirmed, either positive or negative. At least we've heard some decisions on certain things.
Yes.
And what I've heard is that there's going to be long-term support for the monolith. That's good. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy that we got that out. They're invested in keeping the monolith up and running, keeping it secure, and keep putting in those performance improvements and patches. So that's already a win in my view, because the uncertainty made people go away. The fact that now we know that they're going to have our back for at least the next 5 years, and then they will deprecate it, and then we'll have another couple of years. So from where I'm looking at it, I feel comfortable that I have at least another 5 years where Adobe is still providing this security and bug fixes and everything, and we can build the features on top of that ourselves. We've always done that. It's just a different way of putting it into the core. It might be a separate package, or we put it in our own distribution. But the most important thing is that you have this big entity, that's Adobe, that's providing the let's say the stamp or the certification on it being secure, and it being a big organization backing up that product. Now, it doesn't really feel exciting to work on a platform that doesn't get new features, or there's no innovation on that. On that. So that's where we want to jump in and provide this playground that we've always had, so that we can innovate and do cool stuff. Yeah, as I said, we're actively talking in this task force meetings about what we can do to empower the community, to keep the platform going and keep it healthy. I think it's very good that they clearly communicated, like, the innovations are not coming from us anymore. We're innovating on a different aspect. So that opens up the door for another entity to say, well, we're going to play that role, and we are willing to play that role, to become that organization or that platform where you can build in new features. But if the association decides to stand up and become that kind of shepherd, we're very willing to cooperate with them. And if we can find the right balance, or the agree on what's important there, we would even hand over the ownership of that and collaborate with them. So what do I think of it? I'm really not a fan of the patches. That's something that we've discussed in depth on the task force as well, with the core Adobe architects and the architects and the decision makers there. We had this whole brainstorm, or how do you call it? We had a session with them where we wrote out all the issues and the challenges and the positives and the negatives around contributing to Magento. So we had a sticky note meeting where we just threw everything that came up in our mind onto the board. And Adobe is using that to decide their direction, where they're going to go with those patches, because they consulted with some agencies on how those patches would work. But I think that's been a fairly one-sided set of agencies that mostly work on commerce and have a certain mindset that's a bit different from the open source minded agencies. And the main thing the idea that we brought across is that these patches are really nice if those are a midterm solution between releases. So if you have a 2.4 release and a patch comes in that improves something, and it takes too long to merge it into the core, and then the next release is still far out, if we have a patch to fix a certain issue or something like that, then it's awesome to apply 1 patch, 2 patch, 3 patch, 5 patches. I don't care, as long as the next release will include those patches, so we can go back to 0 patches on the next release. Instead, what they thought now is, well, we're gonna hold back on the releases, and if you want to have those improvements or those bug fixes, just pull in a patch and an extra patch, and maybe if a patch conflicts, we'll bring out a new version of a patch. And they said, well, since patches have been working so well for you, everyone uses composer patches, and a lot of agencies told us that that's working well for them. We decided that's going to be the direction where we're going to go with well, instead of releases. And my main thought was like, well, those patches work for us, but they're a means to an end, and they're like no developer is happy to add another patch to their composer package. If you can remove a patch, you're happy. If you need to add one, that's never something to be celebrated. So the idea of having all these patches and versioning them and not being able to run proper tests on them, I mean, how are you going to handle integration tests and functional testing? And if you never have like a set. One thing was like, so what if you're an extension vendor and a customer tells you your plugin is not working? Okay, what Magento version are you on? Yeah, I'm on 2.51. Okay, well, it should work there. What patches do you have installed? Well, yeah, I have that one, and I have that one, and that one. Okay, do you have that one? No, I don't have that one. What version of that patch do you have? Okay, so how do you reproduce, as an extension vendor, how do you reproduce that environment to make sure that your module still works? It's impossible. It's impossible. So I'm really happy they're receptive to our feedback. They're actually happy to have us as a brain tank, or to hear what we think about it, and I think those meetings are really productive. Like things are also moving there internally at Adobe, and it's just all the decision makers kind of moved around. There's some more people left Adobe on the Magento end than I would like to have seen. Not everyone fully found their new position yet. Not everyone is that aware of how the Magento community works in a new role, so they have to kind of learn. I think the Magento community is quite special in a way, how passionate we are and how offended we can get if they do something that we don't like, and how what power we can have, what movement we can generate, and they should celebrate that and harvest that energy instead of not listening to it and still go their own direction, because then only more power to initiatives like MOSCA. And
yes.
I think it's still really important that we have this initiative that we have. I think it already served some purposes, and some things that we thought that we might have to do, like this long-term support and the patches and security things. We were thinking about how we would have to do all those things ourselves. Those became more long-term. And we can focus on some things that can keep the innovation and this community spirit alive in a community.
That's awesome.
I think there's such a power in this community, so much passion, and also so incredibly much money, that it's really, really hard to make Magento go away. Even if Adobe really, really would want to get Magento out of their way, it would be really hard. I don't think at all. I mean, there's too much depending on it for them. Like all their enterprise customers currently building on Luma, it's just another reason why they can't just drop it, because millions and millions are being invested into the Luma platform right now. So they will have to keep supporting that for at least 5 years and probably longer. You've seen how long it took until they could finally get rid of Magento 1, and you still can't kill it. Magento 1 is still, it has a bigger user base than Magento 2. And I see more and more people migrating from Magento 1 to Magento 2, and a lot of people also celebrating that Hyvä has an easier migration for them than Magento 2 by default is.
Yes.
But yeah, it's an interesting landscape. Like you asked me earlier, like where do you think is Magento kind of where OS commerce was? What do you think of the current position of Magento? I think the whole market is different in total. Like the market is much, much bigger, for one.
Yes, for sure.
But also there's more solutions. SaaS solutions weren't quite there 5 years ago. You've seen Magento tried it with Magento Go. I guess it wasn't really the right timing, maybe also not the right execution. But
I would say it was the latter, because that's about when BigCommerce and Shopify popped up. Like, I think it would have been mind-blowing for Magento if they would have executed correctly. Totally revolutionized that whole concept. But yeah, unfortunately, it was so poorly executed. Like I remember we built a site on it, and it was awful. Like, it was genuinely horrendous, trying to make the site look halfway decent. I mean, I couldn't say enough bad things about that. Like, I love the Magento platform, but Magento Go was not right. Let's just put it that way.
Well, so it's good that they pulled the plug on that. But I think there's use cases for a SaaS solution. There's a use case for a merchant that just wants to pay a monthly fee and have a shop, just customize it a bit. And I think they're getting more and more powerful, these API-based things like BigCommerce. You can do more and more things on those platforms. But I think there will always be a use case for on-premise, self-hosted platforms where you own the code base. I think for B2B markets, it's still a really, really big use case. But also, we're trying to bring back the level of complexity there, also with our distribution, which we want to make more lightweight. And on long term, we want to make it easier to learn, make the step for a junior developer to get started with Magento, simplify that, reduce the dependency between modules so that if you remove one bit, not everything breaks.
I get that, yes.
That's actually the next point that we have on the agenda with the task force, to talk about the decomposition, more or less, of the monolith, and see if we can really pull out the dependencies and maybe even create a core. I imagine having a core package that's just the Magento backend or the Magento framework. And then the admin would be a separate package. Luma would be a package. GraphQL would be a package. And so you could have like multiple packages, which are composed of meta packages.
Yes.
And that way, Adobe could actually deprecate Luma in a decent way. Like currently, how the platform currently stands, they can't even deprecate Luma. And it's so much work for them to do that, actually. So now nothing happens on that front. Where I imagine if we could package Luma, pull it out of the core and package it separately, I imagine we can do that without too many things breaking.
Yes.
Then you could have the community own that Luma package, and people could actually innovate on the Luma frontend again. And for us, as Hyvä, we could create a package that installs Hyvä as a front end without all the Luma. So now we have a team that resets Luma, throws everything out that Luma has, and then adds our code on top of it. So if we could actually deprecate Luma and have it optional, you would have so many benefits. Like Adobe could really deprecate it. Yes. And people could contribute to it again, and it would become optional. And you would have a much better package for a PWA install. You would just take the backend with GraphQL and not care about the frontend at all.
Yes.
So I imagine we could get a lot of community power and helping hands to get that in shape together with Adobe.
Yes.
But yeah, that's another thing we're talking about at the task force. Curious to see where that is going.
That will be interesting. That will be interesting. And listen, I mean, this has been good. I've wanted to. Well, we were going to have this conversation a few weeks ago, but we ended up talking about Hyvä, which was this outstanding conversation. But yeah, I've wanted to hear your thoughts. Like, it's about as close to the source as we possibly can get here, because you are part of the source team, as far as what's been happening with MOSCA and Mage-OS and the open source task force and all that stuff. And there's more to talk about. I know that, but we are kind of running into time here. But I'm really grateful for you taking your time, Willem, to share with us. There's like a ton of stuff to digest, and I'll give it some thought and also try to get back. And maybe we need to do another one of these conversations just to try to, because I know there's been some concern in the community. I think that's been somewhat allayed about like how some of this will actually work. And I think this conversation was really good for me to hear as far as the ideas and how this is supposed to work. And yeah, so I'm sure there'll be more questions, and I hope to kind of package all this stuff up, and then we'll have another conversation here maybe in a few weeks if you'd be up for that. So
we can keep going in another episode and get your questions together and do a new examination. No. Then you can interrogate me.
Yeah, interrogation. Yeah, well, it's good. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it, Willem.
Thanks for having me.
It was an absolute pleasure here to have Willem on the show. Someone who's very influential in the community, he has given a lot of thought to the future of Magento, a lot of love to the Magento community. And I am personally grateful for his tremendous investments in the community. And so, if nothing else, if you see him online on Twitter, or I don't know if he's on LinkedIn at all, much at all, but for sure on Twitter, like, give him a shout out. Express your gratitude to him and Vinay and some of the other Ivan and some other people of this open source task force, the Mage-OS community, which are two separate things, but there is some overlap in those two groups of people. Make sure to give them some love, as they are leading the charge. They are running out ahead of all the rest of us, asking those really difficult questions, having those conversations with Adobe, so that this product that we love so much maintains viability and is not just that, but accelerates in growth, because there's so much potential. It's a very mature platform, and there's tremendous potential that this product has. So thank you for participating in Smash the Bug. It was a pleasure having your attendance here in this conversation. I look forward to talking with you next time.